up, guys and gals? I am Levi Garrett, and today I'm going to try to show you how to do an overhead on a 3406E model Caterpillar engine. We are lucky enough to be working on a 2000 Peterbilt 379, and it is so equipped with just that motor. Now, these tools on this table are all that you need to run an overhead, and some of them aren't even needed for that. This, obviously not. Torque wrench, I'll explain all this miscellaneous stuff later. What is essential to do an overhead is a 3/8 or 5/16 socket, standard screwdriver, long 1/2-inch ratchet with a 15/16 socket, 2 feeler gauges sizes 15 thousandths and 30 thousandths, 1 3/8 bolt approximately 2.5 inches long, 9/16, a 3/4, and an 1 1/8. Now, over here, I will show you just how to pin this motor. If you look on the passenger side of your Caterpillar engine, you will see there's a hole down here, right there. Now, you might look down in there and yours might have a plug. This particular motor did have a plug. That's all it is. Take your 9/16, grab a hold of it, loosen it, unthreads right out. Once you get it out, take your 3/8 bolt, slide it in the hole, and you simply bar the motor over. Now you're probably curious as to why the bungee cord's in there. Well, if you're alone, you don't have anyone helping you, if your girlfriend's not around, your dad said, I'm busy, do it yourself, then you got to figure out how to get a bolt in there yourself. So, once you get said bolt in there, run your bungee strap, run it over the head, and as you bar it over, it will shove it in there for you. I'll show you how to do that. Now with your bolt, slip her down here in the length. You know, depending on where your exhaust runs, how close it goes against the flywheel housing, it might depend on how long a bolt you can use. So, once you determine how long a bolt you can get to fit in there, slide her in, and you just push it in until you feel it hit. It'll stop, take your bungee strap, run over the head, just like that. Now to bar your motor over, you go on the front of the engine to the dampener bolts. That's where your 15/16 socket comes in. Now, Pete or Kat, one of the two, in their infinite wisdom, decided this fan needed to lock when the key is off. So, if you like scraping your knuckles up, that's fine. I don't really care to. So, I hook my fan set to power, so it disengages the fan, so it spins free. Once you've gotten that done, take your ratchet, stick it in here, and you get it hooked on one of those bolts. Now there's 6 of them, so once you go so far, you can grab another bite if you have to go all the way around, which you will to do both sides of this. Get on one, and if your motor's been into before, it'll have a mark on the dampener, chances are. Now this mark is going to line up right where it meets with these belts and this dowel that sticks out here. Get her locked, now you're pinned. Alright, so while we're in the motor, I can't stress this enough, if you have it open, be sure to keep it clean. Any dust, dirt, rocks, shit of any sort gets in your motor, that's pretty much the end of it. So if you're going to have it open and you're going to leave for lunch, or something comes up and you got to go, cover it up. Put the valve covers back on, cover it up with rags, whatever you can do, just make sure it stays clean. Now, right quick, I'm just going to touch on if you have to replace an injector. Now, if you're just starting out, you're a kid, you're an owner operator, have your own truck, and you don't have a whole lot of money, then you're obviously not going to want to pay someone very bad to put an injector in. It's not that big of a deal. You can do it all by yourself with that handful of tools that I showed you earlier. All you got to do these 4 bolts, and typically there would be 2 here. This is the only motor I've seen that has 1 nut. Typically there's 2. Take those loose, take your jake assembly off, these rockers and the whole shaft that goes through them, take all that off, and then that's going to give you full access to your injector. Take these little holders loose. There's one 9/16 bolt that holds that injector in the head. All you have to do, take that loose, take a little heel bar, pop that injector out, pull it out, put your new one in. Now, obviously diagnosing which injector is bad is a little more complicated. You guys can send me comments or whatever and ask me about that later. But for right now, I'm just telling you, if you already knew which one, how to replace it. Once you get it back in, torque that bolt, get your rockers back on, put your jake assembly back on. You're going to torque these jakes in a sequence of 40 pounds for the 2 center bolts, 2 center nuts, and then the 2 outer bolts. Then you're going to go 80 pounds on the 2 center bolts, 80 on the 2 outer bolts, and then 60 on the 2 nuts. Like I say, that's for a different date. You guys can ask me about that later. As far as the overhead goes, while you're in here, if you want, it never hurts to go ahead and check the torque on these. Once again, it's 80 for your bolts, 60 for the nuts. They do come loose. Check it while you're in there. Never hurts. So you got your 2 feeler gauges. You're going to need a 30 thousandths and a 15 thousandths. The 30 thousandths feeler gauge is going to be for your exhaust, and your 15 thousandths is going to be for your intake. Now, if you're not sure which is which, the exhaust valve is going to be right above the exhaust port on the manifold. Pretty easy to figure out. And if you can't tell which one, once you pin it, if you're on number 1 or number 6, you can make yourself a cheat sheet, like I did, because I can't remember anything. So, according to my cheat sheet, if you look at your rockers, you can see how this valve is pretty much at the top, and the exhaust valve on 5 is pressed down. Look at my sheet, 5 intake, so we're on number 6. So you can grab them, check them. Now obviously we're doing an overhead because mine are tight. Like number 5 for instance, there is hardly any slop in there. So I'm going to grab a 9/16 and use the box end of your 9/16 wrench to loosen your rocker adjusters. Don't use the open end or you'll round your nuts off. No one likes rounded off nuts. Get her on there, loosen it, and depending on what your adjusters are like, you can either use your fingertips or you might need your standard screwdriver. Mine, I can use my fingertips, so I'm just going to loosen a little bit. And these stick to those bridges, so you just rock her a little and get that feeler gauge shoved down in there. Once you do, just snug that up till you can just feel a hair of drag on that feeler gauge. And make sure that it stays in there. You don't want it halfway in, or kinda in, or a corner of it in, or falling out the back side. You want it all the way in there. Feel around. If you're happy with it, spin your nut down. Grab your standard screwdriver and your 9/16. Once again, box in, fillers, rounded nuts, all that. Get on there, get your standard screwdriver. You're going to hold that, and you're just going to tighten that down. And you want that pretty damn tight. I have had them come loose in the past, and your motor goes to clicking and banging and raising hell, and then you have to get in here and redo it. Once you get her tight, check it again. If you're happy with it, good deal. Move on. Now when you're on 6 or 1, whichever, the valves alternate as to which one you can do. So if 5 intake is up, you're going to do 4 exhaust, and then 3 intake, 2 exhaust. Obviously you're not going to touch number 1 because you won't do that until you're on number 1. So right now I'm going to show you guys how to do number 4. That way I can show you how to adjust the jigs. Grab your 30 thousandths. Once again, you rock that over. Get your 30 thousandths in there. Feel around. Check her out. If it feels good, it's probably alright. If it's loose, go ahead, 9/16, loosen this nut, adjust this, get your standard screwdriver, tighten her down, check it again when you're done. Now, be sure that you adjust the rocker adjuster first before you attempt to adjust your jigs. Now, once you've gotten your rockers all tightened and you want to test your jigs, that rod comes out of the jig assembly and you can just see it. This is kind of a poor shot there. Now this rod right here, that rod attaches to this stud. Now all you're going to do is where that rod hits on this rocker, that's where you're going to slip your feeler gauge. And there again, get your feeler gauge in there and check her out. You just want a little bit of drag. Now if you don't have that, you're going to take your 3/4, you're going to put on this nut, you're going to loosen it, grab your big standard screwdriver, put in there, you want just a hair of drag. I like having it to where it'll just hold that feeler gauge so it doesn't flop around. Get her there. Grab your wrench again. Once again, guys, box end. Slip on there. Hold that stud still. Snug her down. Check her out. Feels good. Go on to the next one. This is one of those tasks where you can't get in a hurry. You're going to want to take your time. Make sure you get everyone set just the way you want it. You set one of these up right, and they're going to run beautifully for you. Set it up wrong, and some are different than others, then it's going to just sound like shit and probably not pull very well. So it's very important that you get them all set very particular. Now, while you're in here, you're going to set your jigs, your injectors. Now, since we're on number 6, we can do injectors 1, 2, and 4. Now, they're kind of easy to tell because they sit pretty much level with each other, whereas the rest of them are going to be wobbled a little bit. But there again, cheat sheet all the way. Now, this tool from Cat, this thing costs about 50 bucks because Cat made it. It's just going to sit on top of your injector. There's a ledge on the bottom of this. I'll show you guys in a bit. And once you get it on there, you're just going to check that for level. Now the top of this rod, it moves. There are 2 steps to that, a lower and an upper. Now Cat says as long as it's between one of the 2, it doesn't matter. Well, I believe that if you're going to set one to the top, set them all to the top. If you're going to set one to the bottom, set them all to the bottom. A lot of guys know how to do it with a dial gauge. I'm not that much of a hand, so I have a tool. Now, like I say, they typically don't move near as much as your valves. Your valves are going to move because the whole time that your engine is running, that valve is going to grind itself up into the seat. So if you have a brand new motor, fresh rebuild, brand new head, fresh seats, that valve actually has to make its own seat because it's going to have grinding residue, little scratches, whatever on it. So, right out the gate, you set the overhead, you run the motor, run it 10,000 miles, and you check the overhead. Within 10,000, those valves are going to grind themselves up into that seat, and the clearance between the valve stem and the rocker is going to close. Now, the reason that this is so important is because if it gets too tight, eventually the rockers actually begin to hold the valves open. When that happens, then it starts to burn your valve seats if it goes like that too long. Now when that happens, you start getting a miss, you start getting low on compression. The only way to remedy it is to redo the head. You just don't want to go there. It's pretty easy to just run an overhead. So, 10,000 miles on the first overhead on a brand new engine, 50,000 after that, and then you do it at 100,000 and 100,000 intervals thereafter. This motor has about 350, 400,000 on it approximately, and it is damn well due. Now, ledge on your injector I was talking about earlier, you can just see it down in there. That is where the rod of that tool is actually going to sit. I'm showing you this because down in there you can't hardly see it. So that tool just sits on there like that. Obviously, this spring's not compressed, so that rod's not quite touching, but you get the idea. It's very important that rod sits right on that ledge, otherwise it's not going to do you a whole lot of good. Now, to check it, you need an 1 inch and an 1/8 wrench. Now, these nuts on top of these injectors are very shallow. It's easy to slip off, so just kind of be careful. Try not to tear yourself up too bad. Use that standard screwdriver. Like I say, top of that tool, you just get to the top of the upper ledge or the bottom of the lower. Whichever one you decide to go with. Some guys claim that if it's on the bottom ledge, you're going to have more stroke. Some guys claim you go to the upper edge, it stays cooler. Personal preference. Try them both. It's no big deal getting in and out of one of these. If you have a Pete, all you have to do to get in one, take the intake off and pull the valve covers off. Pretty simple deal. On the older models where you had a 5EK, you actually had to take the whole radiator support off the top. Now, this one, obviously being newer, 1LW was the first one I think to do it. They have these side mounts, so you don't have to fight with any of that. Now the other thing, this water pipe. Now it's probably recommended that you drain the water out of the system and pull this hose to get it out of your way. Me, I'm a cheater. I like making less work for myself. So I just pry that over and slip that cover out from underneath it. It's more of a pain and a little risky because if your hoses are old, you risk water, you risk rupturing that and water dumping on top of your engine. Obviously you don't want that, so if your hoses look bad, don't risk it. Dump the water. You're going to be there anyway. Replace the hose. That stuff's not that expensive and it'll save you in the long run. Now, when you're all done, once you roll it over, because obviously you have to do one side, roll it over, you do the other side. We're on 6 now. Pull your pin, roll the dampener over 360 degrees, get on number 1, do it all over again. You're going to do the exact opposite of what you already did. Like I say, if you guys need help or you have any questions, send me a comment and I'll send you a list, kind of build you your own cheat sheet so it's a little easier for you to know what's going on. And when you're all finished up and you got your overhead run, please guys, pull all your stuff out. Don't forget your injector tool in the motor. Don't forget your feeler gauges. Don't leave your ratchet in the fan. For God's sake, don't leave the bolt in the flywheel. If you go to start it with that bolt in there, your life is gonna blow so bad, you have no idea. So just make sure everything is out of it. Put your valve covers back on. And like I say, if you're gonna cheat, slip the front one in first, then the other two, get your intake back on, and you're good to go. Make sure you don't have any leaks, go from there. Now if something comes loose later, tear it apart, see what came loose, get it fixed as quickly as possible. So thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, leave them in the comments below, and appreciate you guys watching.